of 13 when my mother passed on because of being trans. So from then on, I've had to fend for myself. I've had to clothe, bathe, do anything that you do as a person for yourself. As young as I was able to do it. I don't know how. Um, and then I grew up and then I became the woman that I am. I think what really ignited the spirit of activism within me was the struggles that I faced in varsity. Because in as much as I went through what I went through, I was still able to get into universities in South Africa that are considered Ivy League, right? Um, all your universities are qualified to get to them. But then I went to a university in my home province in the Free State, and I sort of faced like such atrocious acts against me, against my person. It was all forms of discrimination. I couldn't take showers in peace because all the boys that I stayed with would, open the doors and ask me which private part I had, or like sort of like just invasive acts, right? So that is when I decided that, I mean, sometimes it takes you to start an entire revolution and to champion the rights of people that look like you and that are like you, right? So that is when I started, my journey of activism. It was, I think, 10 years ago in 2014 when I was doing my first year in varsity in South Africa. And that is sort of where activism started for me. But I do realize that my entire existence has been like some form of, a political stance. Because, as a trans person navigating every space that we find ourselves in, more especially in Africa, your existence, only that is some form of a political act, because in Africa, we're still not recognized as people. Yeah, so that is what I can say.
Thank you so much for that. Let's go to Wally.
Thank you. For me, it's because I don't like injustice. I have empathy for people. And 5 years ago, I start working with a human rights organization in my country. And I noticed one thing. We had so many cases of violence, and it was just gay people, lesbian, homosexual, but no transgender person. So as a trans person, it was so difficult for me to just stay here and see the things happen. So I start to look for some trans person in my area because, in Gabon, in the LGBT community, people don't have any knowledge of transgender. Yeah. Gay people or lesbian people, they just don't know, and we face some discrimination. So I start to look for some trans person because I'm from a very supportive family. I'm so lucky because in Africa, it's very difficult. Yeah. So I wanted to give the chance that I had to the other people that don't have the same chance that I have. So I started to work for my community. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go on to Millicent.
Thank you very much. Probably just to give a brief context. I come from a country where homosexual acts are criminalized. And when we get to engage and even talk about our existence, it's when we're talking about health, when we're talking about HIV and things like that. Outside of that, there's no representation and there's no inclusion. And for most people that look like me, it was very difficult to see that there is little to no room of representation and inclusion. Yes, that's what's one of the things that motivated my journey to do advocacy within the LGBTQ community. And I specifically say the LGBTQ community because of realization of that gap and realization that there is need for inclusion of everyone and representation of people that express themselves like me or express themselves like you, but have a different sexual orientation, and how best we can coexist together. So for me, that's what drives me to do a lot of advocacy work that I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. So I'm going to move on to some specific questions for each of you. So Millicent, well, I'll go to Wally. Wally, how does your work in the fashion and cosmetics industry intersect with your advocacy for LGBTQ plus rights?
In my country, we don't have access to employment, except in if you want to be, for example, a makeup artist or stylist, things it's more easy in my country. And to be honest, it wasn't difficult for me to be a transgender person and working at the fashion and beauty industry. That's my experience. So I don't know what it is about you, but that's my experience.
Well, thank you. Julio, what are some of the key initiatives by Access Chapter 2 that have had a significant impact on inclusive healthcare for transgender individuals?
Okay, that is a beautiful question. I started working for Access Chapter 2, I think, in 2020 something. Can't remember exactly. And so what we're doing currently is that we are implementing a transgender program within a district in the Northwest Province in South Africa. So what this program speaks to, it speaks to access to comprehensive healthcare for trans people. We do all sorts of healthcare service provision. Like there's a doctor, if you need any mental services, we've got a psychosocial support unit that we have. We also make provision for HIV treatment and care, and also for hormonal therapy as well. So my work is that we sort of gather people around in the Northwest Province, trans people, and sort of provide them with care, because also we have mobile clinics that go out to look for trans people and ensure that they get the services that we provide as a transgender program within the Northwest Province. So that is what we do.
Thank you. That's amazing. Millicent, can you elaborate on the role of Sisters in Systemic Transformation Agenda and its impact on the visibility of LBQ women in Zimbabwe?
Thank you. I'll first like to recognize that as we're working in Zimbabwe and me growing up, there are organizations that are working towards amplifying the visibility and the voices of LBQ women. And there might be 3 or 4 of those organizations, but there's always room to do more for our community and for our people. And a sister being the saying we can serve the community beyond people who are not yet out, people who are in the closet, or people who want to just access a different space. And using social media and online platforms to do it, it even increases our reach. Hence to say there's always space and room for more people to come and do the work that we do, as long as we're serving the community that we intend to serve. And using online platforms as sister to do that and social media to do that, I feel like in the context from where we're coming from, that is very courageous. And from a context where we're coming from, we are also reaching out to young people that are using technology, young people that are in school, young people that are in universities and colleges and may not have time to always come to the safe spaces that we provide, but can always get information online and can always be educated on what's happening online. And we can always share so much online. And looking at the generation that we are in Zimbabwe, we call it Ama2K. And that generation and social media, you cannot separate it. And for sister to be able to reach out to everyone using those platforms, I feel like it really gives us that voice that we need to amplify and that visibility and representation and inclusion that we seek to have in Zimbabwe.
So, thank you. This is a question for all of you, but we'll start with Vuyo again. What are some of the biggest challenges you faced in your advocacy work, and what have been your most significant triumphs?
Okay. Firstly, I'm going to be very honest with you. In my advocacy work, I've encountered so many organizations in Africa, whose constitutions in paper and policies in paper and what they intend to do in paper is so beautiful. But then when you get there, the work is not, it's just not there. They get the grants, they get the funding, but the work is simply not being done, right? And for me, this disadvantages the people, the very same people that we say we are championing for, right? So for me, my biggest struggle has been people or sort of like organizations that have masqueraded as LGBTI organizations or queer organizations that or people that represent the interests of queer people while they know that they're not doing that, while they're just using the funds or our struggles as a people to get the funding so that they can do other things. I think my biggest triumph was when we released a book in as form of a research tool with an organization in South Africa called Gender Dynamics in Cape Town. The book is called Rural Trans Narratives and is found online. So basically what the book is, it sort of gives people a perspective of what it is to be trans in rural South Africa, growing up in those places that do not have resources, that do not have the information for you to fully understand or fully comprehend what you're going through or what you are as a trans person growing up. So I think that book for me was the highlight of my very infant career. To say I was able to be a part of that. And that is for me such a powerful tool. So challenges is that there's a lot of people that are getting money that are not doing the work. And the triumph is that there has been research put out for people in South Africa to sort of understand rural trans people on a deeper level. Thank you.
Thank you. Amazing. So Wally, what are some of the biggest challenges you faced in your advocacy work, and what has been your biggest triumph?
One of my biggest challenge, it's very personal. I know that I said before that my family was very supportive with me, but at the same time, they support me and love me for the woman that I am. But I have a conflict with my family because they don't want me to expose myself. They don't want me to be advocate for my community. They don't. I'm here in America in this amazing program. And it's so sad because my family didn't call me, because I'm here and it's like I'm on the spotlight. They don't want it. Yeah. And also one of the highlights of my advocacy as a human rights and advocate for trans people. I work with the US Embassy a few years ago in my country. years ago to create a program. It's called Safe Space. Yeah, this program, it was for the LGBT community, and we have some struggle, health, access to justice, and this was the first program in my country to be inclusive, because the government have so many programs, but they don't include this community. So this was one of my highlights. Mhm.
Thank you. Millicent?
Thank you. So one of the challenges that I have been facing within our advocacy work, especially with the LGBTQ community in Zimbabwe specifically, is the issue on data, on research. When we advocate for the issues that we advocate for, eventually the question comes to say, how many people are affected by this problem? And I believe for me, the biggest challenge is not even having a size estimate of how many OBQT people are we talking about. We were just talking about Millicent and Vuyo, and you're out here making so much noise about it. So for me, the biggest challenge is not being able to have that data or to have resources to conduct research that supports our advocacy work that we do. And because of that challenge, we will find ourselves as this particular group behind in a lot of things that are taking place, even things that advance the lives and the rights of the LGBTI persons. But without data to support it, it becomes just another narrative story. And data, we realize that in Africa is very much important to inform advocacy and inform policies and inform change within the communities that we come from.
I just wanted to say something quickly.
Yes, sure.
When we're sitting here, and I'm just reliving some of the moments that I've had with trans people in South Africa, right? That I've been able to encounter. And I'm like, there is no way I'm not going to mention this, right? When we think of successes in our work as activists, as people, we always think of these big moments where you do something that is powerful, right? But for me, I think my challenge, number one, and I'll pair it with the challenge also. My challenge for me was sort of, or is sort of, always having to relive the trauma every day, because every trans person that I encounter, for me, is a trigger. So that is a challenge for me, because almost all of us face the same things each and every day. You encounter somebody that triggers you, that triggers your trauma, which in turn, every day you must always work on your internal issues. You must always try to sort of fix yourself and sort of remind yourself that this is why you're here and this is why you're fighting for these people, because they share the same struggles as you. And the triumph is when they come back a few days later and they look at you in your face and they say, thank you for making me feel seen. Thank you for hearing me. Thank you for humanizing me. And thank you for making me feel like there is hope for me. Because when I started speaking to you, I was on the verge of committing suicide. So for me, those kinds of moments for me, those a collection of those moments for me are what also speaks to success for me. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was beautiful. So I want to ask each of you, I know that HIV is affecting your communities, but are your communities or countries affected by MPOX?
Yes.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about the effects that MPOX has had on your communities or your country? Wally, you want to start?
In my country, 80% of trans people living with HIV. And also it's a trouble because, for example, some people came to me and want some information about how to deal with HIV treatment and hormone treatment. But I can answer because I'm not a doctor.
Mhm.
I'm not living with HIV. I'm not a doctor. I can't answer, and it's very difficult because some people, I know some people who the solution is just to commit suicide because no one can understand you, no one can help you. We don't have any psychologist. That's why in my focus project for the Mandela Washington Fellowship, I mentioned that I want to be a psychologist for my community because it's very important. Mhm.
Um, for a very long time, and so to this day, people always look at HIV as a gay disease, right?
Mhm.
Or as a trans disease, right?
Mhm.
So when we have things like monkeypox or mpox, people always sort of associate that with the LGBTI community, which is fundamentally very wrong because it affects everybody, right? For me, there has been a lack of information towards the community, more especially in South Africa. I don't think enough is being done to sort of make the LGBTI community and people in general aware of the effects and the impact of mpox and what it could do to you as a person and your health. So I don't honestly think that there is that much information as far as mpox is concerned. And I think in terms of that, we could do a little bit more because we know that we are one of the most vulnerable groups. That's why we are considered a key population in terms of health risks and stuff like that. So I think there could be just a little bit more that is done in terms of mpox information dissemination.
Thank you.
Not a little more, so much more that we should do in terms of disseminating information around mpox, really, even within the community that we come from, the community that we're representing here, even just nationally, if you ask anybody that is just a human being where I'm coming from, do you have so much information or do you know anything about it? Not so much, but when it comes to HIV, they would know something because there's so much that have been done within that field to educate people, to disseminate information, ABC. But when it comes to mpox, not much. Not there isn't much information. Even if you ask a very educated person about it, they wouldn't tell you anything much about it. So I think there is need to continuously to engage, to do so much more, to strengthen the systems that we have in country so that they're able to disseminate this information to everybody. And when it comes to HIV and the interventions that are being done, the results are pretty much great. It's excellent. We are doing the work. The work is being seen within the communities, within the people that we live with. But probably when it comes to other diseases that may affect an individual besides HIV, not really is much done. Not really information is shared. And resources for even to accommodate that besides HIV, they are not there. And there is a great need for us to start doing that. Yeah.
Thank you. And that's a good segue into my next question. How does your organization address the unique challenges faced by transgender individuals regarding HIV prevention and treatment? And I'll let either of you jump in.
You can go in with.
No, you haven't started with any question, and we have Wally and myself have just been like the first ones to answer. But but I'll answer. It's okay. I think in terms of HIV work, there has just been so many interventions. But the problems are very, like, when you can't deal with the root of the problem. So the result is always the same, right? The truth is that our trans people need education. They need employment to take care of themselves, right? So that even if we can bring them the treatment, but then you can't take the treatment on an empty stomach, right? You cannot be at a point where your life is not balanced. because of lack of employment. Because in all honesty, our trans people are literally dependent on things like sex work, which exacerbates their chances of, getting other opportunistic diseases, even when they are HIV positive. Or even if they're not, then it exposes them to HIV even more. Because sex work, as we know, it's the most riskiest job in terms of HIV infection that you can do. So there are interventions that are being done. We are sort of coming up with these programs. There's these fundings, but if these fundings don't speak to skills development, then we still have a problem. If they don't speak to educating the entire population about LGBTI issues, then we're still going to have a problem. Because at the end of the day, mental health of trans people is going to stand on the way, and it's going to affect how they take their treatment. Because sometimes you are just not yourself, and how are you expected to take medication when you are not yourself? So for me, there are interventions that are being done, very well interventions, but they are not equally met with the same efforts to change the social statuses of trans people. So if we can look at changing the social statuses of these people, of trans people, then it will be a very good start.
Thank you.
I'll say this, and I'm not gonna say the abbreviations. The lesbians, the bisexuals, the queer, the trans men, when it comes to HIV programming in Africa, they are left out because there is no data or evidence that supports that they are at risk of HIV. We come from Africa and our context is very much different. People experience corrective rape. People are into sex because of the socio-economic statuses. There are other factors that are contributing. We have sexual transmitted infections around those particular groups. And no one is talking, or no one is interested on finding out how that context can put someone at risk of HIV. And we need to change that narrative. And we need to put resources into ensuring that whatever the assumptions we have are true. And you'll be surprised that because of the context in Africa, we are all at risk of HIV. And because of the context in Africa and what we go through, there is need to put resources into research, into data that will then justify the need of putting the same effort within our MSM community, within our trans men community, within our intersex community. There is resources that are going that way because there is data that supports their risk, their vulnerability. There is need to equalize this particular community. Because of doing that, we will find ourselves divided. We find ourselves fighting. We find ourselves not justifying why this particular group does not deserve A, B, C, D. But if you put in research, if we have data that look at context of those particular groups, you will realize that we are all at risk of HIV, and there is need to really look at everyone if we're going to achieve the 2030 agenda. I'll say that.
Thank you.
In
Wale?
my country, HIV is still a taboo. For example, people don't say HIV. They just say the disease. It's still a taboo. And for example, when I started with my organization, I was looking for trans people. And one of my friends said to me, you need to go in the streets and look for some sex worker. And I was so shocked because I found 10 trans people walking in the streets as a sex worker. And as a sex worker, they don't have any knowledge about prevention, about, and also one day with one of my colleagues, I had a meeting with some people. It was about finding some solution to fight HIV pandemic. And one of the people in the group, he knew that my colleague was gay. And he said to my colleague, "We don't allow gay people here." I was shocked because HIV is for everybody. HIV don't know if you gay, lesbian, black, green, red, it's for everybody. So, the struggle is real. The discrimination is real. That's the case in my country.
Well, thank you, but I think y'all shattered my next question. I was going to ask, can you share of any successful programs or initiatives that have helped reduce HIV transmission rates in your transgender communities?
I think the program that I was working on with Accessibility 2, the transgender program, I think it really sort of like worked towards the reduction of infections through PrEP that we initiated people on, and through the retention of people that were on or that are still on ART, which is the medication that is taken as sort of like treating the virus. So I think, yes, there are strides that have been done. And yeah, one of those strides is the program that I just alluded to.
Nice, thank you. Are we taking questions? So yeah, I guess at this time we'll take a few questions from the audience. If there are any other questions that folks might have right here in the front.
So my question is, all vulnerable groups, that Blacks, people from the LGBT community, we are vulnerable groups. We need allies because strength is in numbers and we need other people in the fight. So I was wondering, in your countries, how many allied groups do you have that lie outside of the OBQ community? And then how much work are you all doing to educate people in the general population about what your struggles are, what your needs are?
In my country, for example, a few years ago, we had the chance to have some allies. For example, the previous First Lady, my country, she came to our organization, and with her, we try to develop a program to help LGBT people in terms of health resource, and include HIV, access to hormone, and unfortunately, 6 months before, we had a new regiment in my country, and we don't have we didn't have the time to see the things implement. Thank you. She is now in jail, and the new regiment doesn't allow people like us. So
just to sort of also attempt to answer you, right? There are allies, right? And people that say they are allies, right? But are you really an ally when you, in my face, you are pro me, but as soon as you turn my back on me, then it's a different thing. I think a lot of people have different understandings of what an ally is. And an ally is somebody who is an ally even when there isn't any LGBTI people in the room. An ally is somebody that speaks for me in tables that I don't sit at. That is an ally. And so I think in South Africa, we sort of grappling with that a little bit. We still are trying to find who is who in the zoo, because there is really a lot of people that are allies when they are with us. And then as soon as the tables turn, or as soon as their back is, they face the other way, then they're not allies anymore. Yeah. But it is very important also that we teach people of allyship, because I think, for me, I believe so much in intersectionality. Because I believe that you, as a Black woman, if you can find common struggles that we share together, then you're able to fight for me. Because you know that somewhere, somehow, there are human things that make us united. So if we look at it from that lens, then I think allyship is going to go far. But as far as allyship is concerned, that is all I have to share in terms of South Africa. Yeah.
Probably just to buttress what Vuyo said. Allyship for us, it's within the communities, the different organizations that exist in Zimbabwe. There is allyship there. And there is even allyship with government ministry, the Ministry of Health, because they're bringing the discourse on health and the key populations. They don't really say we're LGBT people, we are key populations. So there is that allyship because we're working together to achieve a certain agenda by 2030 in terms of HIV. But as we also said, we need allies that just go beyond the pills that we take and the high rate of positives that are within the country. We need allies that will speak to our social economic status. We need allies that will speak to skills development. We need allies that will speak to me as a human being first, before my sexual orientation and who I sleep with. That is an ally. And we just need to keep cultivating those allies. We just need to even teaching people how to be an ally. Somebody could be an ally, but they wouldn't know what to do more outside of a health platform. And there is need to teach that before we start pointing fingers to say they're not supportive enough.
I just wanted to add something. I'm always adding. I'm sorry. I apologize. I think I want people that want to be allies to start looking at trans and LGBTI people not as that community that is riddled with HIV, because most of the time that is the root of people's allyship. They're always like, no, we want to reduce the stats and what of the LGBTI people, but they're not allies in terms of our lives, right? Which is the most important aspect of our work. Humanize me, understand me on a human level before you could even understand my HIV, because HIV does not define me. Oh, you understand what I mean? Understand that I have to eat, I have to work, I have to bath before, not just drink pills so that we can reduce the stigma and reduce the number of people that are on art. But look at me from a human lens or from a human perspective, and then that is when you can say I'm an ally.
Thank you.
I actually want you guys to maybe touch on the violence that is happening in your countries with the community, right? Because just earlier this year, there was a case in Zimbabwe of I would say she's famous, Sunflower, who went missing for quite some time, right? What sort of initiatives are there to safeguard transgender bodies and expansive people with this violence that is, geared towards them? That is number one. Number two, and in your, different organizations that you work with, is there sort of like a safe house where, people could actually seek asylum at those different venues, if at all they do exist within your countries?
Thank you, BK, for your question. And the example that you just gave right now reflects that we do not have systems that actually support people when they go through what Sunflower went through. And it becomes very hard in a country where you're even criminalized for homosexual acts, and you come back and you want to be transgender. There are no policies. There is nothing that will protect you as an individual from such violent acts that happens to you as a human being, first of all. So that case on its own, it's a reflection on systems that are there, but they're not protecting the LGBTI persons. If you go on social media, it's now about her gender identity. It's now about who she is. It stops about what she went through. It stops being about the violence. Others is justifying the violence. And if we do not change the laws and the policies in our country, we can even begin to talk about protecting LGBTI persons. Hence, Africa needs to do better. Hence, when we go for different platforms, or we have the African Union, we have the United Nations, I wish sometimes there could be an agenda that actually shows that if we do not have policies and laws that protect LGBT persons, when they go through so much violence, abuse, and they cannot even begin to report it, how do you go and report that I'm a transgender woman who's just been violated, when in the first place you're not even allowed to exist? It becomes very complicated. Hence, we really need to do better. But there are organizations that will offer you psychosocial support. There are organizations that will do their best to assist you, but it's really not enough, because eventually today Sunflower, tomorrow it's Millicent, the third day is Vuyo. How many people need to experience violence before we understand that there is need to protect them?
Do you want to take it and then I'll end? Or go? Okay. Violence against queer bodies, an African phenomenon. For me, if we were to count the number of times where queer people were raped, I mean, I think 3 out of 5 people in Africa have reported some form of sexual harassment or some form of sexual abuse because of their gender identity or sexual orientation. And that is an alarming statistic. I think if we want to speak about violence against queer bodies, then I will be here talking the whole night, right? And this is still when we are saying we are still educating people or still trying to come up with interventions. So it means that people are simply not listening, because we still find queer bodies burnt beyond recognition each and every day. Lesbian women correctively raped each and every day, and they can't even go to our police stations, because you go to a police station, you sensitize them, you train them on LGBT issues, the next day they're forgotten. Because it's not that important like our existences are not that important to them. We train people every day, public office bearers, every office. My organization that I worked for, Access Chapter 2, goes to each and every clinic to tell people, listen, this is how you should treat queer people. This is what you should do. These are interventions that you can make. Here are pamphlets for you to disseminate from here. But still, people are not willing to listen. I always make this example to say, sometimes you can take the donkey to the river, but you can't make the donkey to drink the water from the river. And that is simply what has been displayed in Africa. We have moved away from saying we need more information. Information is there now. Information is there. Even now, people have smartphones, people have iPhone 15 Pro Maxes. And like, it is so disheartening that somebody could spend 5 hours on Pornhub and not just spend 5 minutes on understanding what gay is. Like, if you literally type gay on your search engine, it'll explain to you in layman's terms. But then you'd rather spend 5 hours on Pornhub and not understand humanity and what it is. And then they always say, no, I don't have enough information. It's problematic. We have the trainings, we have the interventions, but people are simply not coming to the party as far as understanding and retaining the information because they don't regard it as important. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to go quickly. Like she said, everybody knows about the violence against physical violence against trans people. I just want to share with you a story. Before coming here for this program, I need a passport. So the people in my country, they didn't want to give me a passport because I was a trans woman. If you you apply for this program, and it's mean that you are an elite, you know. I represent my country. This is supposed to be a pride, but they they just didn't want to give me my passport. That's a shame. That's psychological violence, and it's just crazy. It's just crazy. Yeah, because I'm the kind of woman, I never give up. You know, I'm here. I don't speak English. I speak French, but I'm here. You know, that's my story.
Thank you for being.
Thank you.
We have another question in the back.
Yes. I just really want to thank each and every one of you for sharing your stories. So helpful for me. I'm a healthcare provider. My initial specialty was in the area of pediatrics, which deals with children and families. And we all can agree that transgender youth are a vulnerable population. Now, Governor Gavin Newsom in California just recently made a law stating that parents do not have to be notified if their child changes their pronoun. First state in this country is very forward thinking, and it protects the transgender youth. However, on the part of the parent, the argument is they don't have information about their child. And, you know, there's this intersection between youth and families, and how can we all have a conversation, you know, to make this population like less vulnerable and involve all the voices from legislation to healthcare providers to parents and family, and give kids control as far as what's healthy for them. So my question is to this group, given your experiences as a youth, what can we do to forward this conversation so that we can all make this a better place for everyone?
I think for me, I'm just grateful that you guys are actually having that conversation, because in Africa, the issue of pronouns is still an issue, right? It's still an issue where even in my country, South Africa, for you to change your pronouns or your gender marker on your ID, a psychologist must come and say, this person is not what you see as, or you know, you need to have a letter from a doctor saying to Home Affairs that this person is on medication to become a woman. Right. So for me, when we engage on issues of pronouns, it really sort of saddens me, because even in my country, you can't freely say I'm a woman and then you get recognized, right? But in terms of answering you or trying to attempt to answer you, I think letting kids self-determine is very important, because as parents, there's sort of some ideals and some inculcation of our own beliefs and religious worldviews that we want to put into our kids, and it's wrong. We can't let our kids live lives or their lives how we want them to be. Let them self-determine. If they want to change their pronouns, let them do it.
Thank you. That was a great answer. So I guess now we're going to wrap up. I want to thank all of you for being here. Thank you for the amazing work and your resilience. Continue to grow, and Ferris, and we'll be watching you. And thank you.